It started with a knock at the wrong time, at the wrong place. Anna froze, her chest tightening, as if the air itself had grown heavy. Matteo clung to her side, his small fingers entwined in hers, eyes wide, but curious. Outside the cabin, the sound of boots in the snow was deliberate, measured, a warning. Vala, ever vigilant, stepped forward, hackles raised. For years, she had lived in the shadows of men like him. Shelters meant to protect her had hidden darkness instead, and she had learned that running was the only way to survive. But survival comes at a cost, and sometimes the smallest moments of trust can feel like the first spark of a fire in a frozen forest. Ethan watched silently, his calm a stark contrast to the storm of fear inside her. He had lost someone he loved too, and he knew that fear and grief could bind or break a person. And in that moment, they all realized something extraordinary. That courage doesn't always roar, and that heroes sometimes arrive on four legs, silent but unyielding. This isn't just a story of escape, it's a story of loyalty, trust, and the small, sacred moments that remind us that love, real, unconditional love, can be found in the most unexpected places. The storm had pressed Everpine flat, as if a white palm had come down to hush the town. Snow slouched against storefronts on Main, swallowing the wooden steps outside the diner, and burying the newspaper rack so deep only the blue plastic headline strip showed like a drowned flag. Street lamps hummed, each wrapped in its own halo. Their light fell in cones that seemed solid enough to lean on, then blew sideways, pulverized into glitter by the wind. No cars moved, no voices carried. The plows had given up around midnight. After that, the town belonged to the weather, and to the two figures moving against it. One man, one dog. Ethan Cole broke the silence in a rhythm that felt more like a heartbeat than footsteps. Crunch, breathe, crunch, breathe. His boots sank past the ankle with every step, and the snow gave a soft, muffled groan, as if it hurt to be displaced. Beside him, Vala kept an easy mechanical pace, breath vapor rising in regular plumes from a muzzle silvered by years. The old shepherd's ears were up, but not alarmed, the way they were when he was working for real, focused, not frantic. A battered leather collar circled his neck, the stamped letters still legible. Vala, retired K9. The word retired read like a dare. They made an odd patrol, a cruiser parked 2 blocks back, in a pocket of windless dark, and Ethan choosing to walk. In weather like this, he preferred ground underfoot and the quiet that came with it. The radio at his shoulder hissed softly now and then, as the dispatcher's voice bled into static, a murmur of numbers and road closures that floated away on the next gust. He touched the mic out of habit, then left it alone. There was nothing to say. He liked the storm because it rearranged the world into simple shapes, white and black, near and far, warm and cold. There were nights when noise helped, when he could bear other people's voices, the jukebox at the Rusty Spur, the clatter of plates at Donna's diner. But most nights, the quiet was the only thing that didn't demand an answer. In the snow, he could hear himself without having to speak. Claire would have laughed at that, the way she laughed at his carefulness. "You were born old," she used to say, tucking a scarf around his neck and pushing him toward the door. "Go on. Go count the porch lights like you always do." It was the kind of line that used to irritate him, the gentle tease of a woman who knew him better than he knew himself. Now the memory of it ached in him, like the cold in his knuckles. He wore his wedding band on a chain under his thermal layers, and sometimes, when the wind cut through even the parka, He would press his glove to his chest and feel the small circle of metal burn back. He did that now without thinking, glove resting for a beat against the zipper line, then dropping again to the flashlight clipped to his belt. Valor glanced up the way he always did when Ethan touched his chest. A quick check, a quiet question. "You good?" Ethan nodded into the wind, as if the gesture could satisfy both of them. "I'm right here," he said aloud, because the dog could hear tone even when the words were shredded by the gale. They passed the church, with the steeple that always looked a little like a finger pointing, and the cross atop it wore a cap of snow that the wind worried but couldn't quite dislodge. The nativity set on the lawn. Everpine kept it out long past Christmas, mostly because no one remembered to put it away, was half buried, only the curved backs of the sheep and the tip of a shepherd's crook visible. Ethan paused to sweep the beam of his flashlight over the rectory door and the office window, habit as old as training. He checked what could be checked. All still, all locked, all white. He kept moving. The storm moved with him, filling his tracks as if he were walking on a conveyor belt that recovered itself after every step. The diner's neon sign, Donna's, had given up on pink hours ago, but a stubborn red N flickered, turning the drifting snow a faint, bloody color in pulses. "Warm up here," the hand-painted window used to promise in curling letters, but someone had scraped the paint clean after the last health inspection, and now the glass said nothing. Ethan reached out, pressed his glove to the cold pane anyway, like touching the absence of a word. On better nights, he parked, walked both sides of Main, checked the pharmacy back door, circled past the feed store and the barber shop, cut through the lot behind the old cinema, where the snow piled deepest. He liked the geometry of it, the squares of light and the dark alleys, the routine that could be checked off and filed in his head. Routine was a ladder. It was what he climbed in the months since he lost Claire. If he kept his hands busy, his feet moving, his thoughts would come to heel. The dog helped with that, too. Valor was a quiet metronome, ticking time beside him. Nothing dramatic, just the steady insistence of presence. Sometimes, when the wind dropped for a heartbeat, he could hear Valor's claws clicking faintly on a patch of glassy ice beneath the powder, a sound like knitting needles, delicate and domestic in the middle of a wasteland. The dog's tail swung low, neither tucked nor high, the flag of a soldier on the march. Every dozen steps or so, Valor's head would turn slightly, left-right, a scan both practiced and unconscious. Ethan didn't have to think about how much he trusted that head on a swivel. Trust had embedded itself the way cold did, a fact you could curse, but couldn't change. He thought of Claire again when the wind carried the smell of wood smoke from the hill. Houses up Pine Ridge still had stoves that took cordwood stacked against cinder-block walls, and the scent snapped at him like a leash. Winter at the cabin had always meant a chore list. Split the oak, sweep the chimney, check the pipes. Last winter he'd done it alone. This winter he had the dog and the patrol to make excuses for not sitting in the quiet, where her absence echoed. He would go up after shift, refill the kettle, warm a can of soup he'd pretend to taste, and fall asleep in a chair he had sworn he would get rid of. He never did. Valor's breath was the only living sound for several blocks. It entered Ethan's awareness, and left again like waves in a small bay. There and gone, there and gone. In the stiff light of the lamps, the vapor looked like a series of ghosts escaping one after another, only to vanish as if the night had absorbed them for its own. Ethan reached down once, glove brushing the dog's shoulder, fingers compressing the dense winter coat to the muscle beneath. The dog leaned into the pressure, just a hair, acknowledged. They crossed a drift where the wind had sculpted the snow into a cornice, hard as plaster. Ethan put his weight down and felt it hold, then crack in a fault line that zigzagged toward the curb. He stepped back, reset, seated his heel carefully. Then the ball of his foot balanced a quiet conversation between body and ground. The storm had a way of turning small movements into consequences. You couldn't coast. You had to choose every inch. Maybe that was what he liked most. In a world that had refused him his say, a storm's hazards were democratic, even merciful, transparent in their danger. The radio popped and spit out a road update for Highway 26. Words clipped, more hiss than content. He thumbed it to acknowledge, said his call sign, let his voice ride the noise without introducing anything human into it. A lone porch light blinked up ahead, then steadied, then blinked again. Power lines chattered in their ice jackets, singing a brittle song to themselves. The wind stiffened, then fell. The whole town inhaled. Easy, Ethan said, not because anything was wrong, but because that word lived between them now, the way it had lived between him and Claire when she reached for a jar on the top shelf. Easy. We're both here. Vala's ear twitched, then settled. The dog's head stayed forward. Ethan made a mental note to check the old Ranger road on his way up to the cabin after shift, just to make sure the chain across the entrance hadn't blown loose again. Teenagers had a way of testing boundaries in weather that hid tracks. He would check it because he always checked it, the same way he tapped each back door on Main, the same way he made a pass by the middle school, even when school was closed, and the lot was a field of white. They turned at the intersection where the stop sign had grown a cowl of snow. The sign's red face peered from under it like a monk who had lost his hood to a prank. The wind ran down the cross street, like water in a ditch, and for a moment the drift there was scoured flat to the asphalt. Ethan saw his own reflection in the glazed surface, dark parka, fur-lined hood, the square of his jaw peaked with frost. Beside him, Vala's shape was tidy and compact, a shadow with breath. Isolation shaped the town into a map only two souls read tonight. Danger lived in the places where visibility ended. Behind the semi-trailer that hadn't made it up the hill, under the hollow steps of the old boarding house, inside the quiet of a locked car where someone might be sleeping and not wake again. Ethan ticked through the list like prayer beads. He didn't know if he believed in God anymore, but he believed in lists. They passed the playground behind the elementary school, the swings frozen in mid-arc like punctuation marks, the slide wearing a skirt of snow ruffled by wind. Ethan lifted the beam of his flashlight once, out of habit, tracing the fence line. The night gave him nothing back but glitter. "What do you say we call it at the bench and head up?" he asked, talking as much to the idea of a plan as to the animal. Vala glanced up, eyes catching a thread of lamplight and throwing it back amber. The dog didn't answer, of course, but a dog's silence never felt like indifference. It felt like a promise. They moved on. The storm kept replacing the world behind them, even as it opened the way ahead, the white closing, the white parting, a motion like breath. In the seam between those movements, where past and future traded places, Ethan felt a faint tug on the cord that bound him to the dog, the town, the night. Not a fear, not yet. Just a small pressure on the line, the barely there sensation you get when something at the far end of a rope tests whether you are still holding on. He tightened his glove around the leash, and Vala's ears lifted a fraction, the most delicate adjustment of posture, a single note in a melody that had been steady all evening. The wind carried a change with it, too subtle to name, as if the storm were exhaling a secret into their path. Ethan didn't slow. He didn't hurry. He did what he had been doing since the first snow fell that season. He moved forward, one measured step after another, with a dog at his side, and the sense that somewhere up ahead the night was about to ask them for more than their footprints. The storm had a way of swallowing sound, of eating the crunch of boots and the hiss of breath, until it felt as if the world was nothing but white silence. Ethan Cole knew that silence well. He had grown used to it, sometimes even welcomed it, because it gave him space where his memories could move without colliding into the noise of other people. Tonight, though, the silence broke in a way he did not choose. Valor stopped. The shepherd's body stiffened like a cable pulled taut. One moment his stride was even, shoulders rolling in the practiced rhythm of a working dog, and the next he locked in place, head thrust forward, ears sharpened into points against the wind. Ethan felt the leash grow heavy in his hand, then vibrate with the low growl that rumbled up from the dog's chest. It wasn't a frantic sound. It was deliberate, as if Valor had reached back through years of training and found the command word etched into his muscles. Alert. Ethan's breath fogged and froze on his scarf as he bent slightly, scanning through the sheets of snow. The storm made distance impossible to judge. Everything just beyond the street lamp's halo looked like a smear of ash and chalk. But he didn't second-guess the dog. Valor didn't waste his breath on false alarms. "What is it, boy?" Ethan murmured, though the words were for himself more than for Valor. His fingers adjusted their grip automatically, loosening to give the dog slack, tightening when Valor leaned into the wind, a pulse of communication through leather and glove. The growl deepened. Then Valor surged forward. Ethan followed without hesitation, boots plowing into drifts that reached nearly to his knees. The wind howled as if trying to erase the path the dog carved, filling prints as soon as they were made. His thighs burned with the effort, lungs raw with cold air, but he matched Valor's determination step for step. Trust made the decision for him. Claire used to say that Valor was his second pair of eyes, and she wasn't wrong. The dog cut across the street, nose low now, weaving with sharp, deliberate movements that spoke of scent, not sight. The storm's edge carried secrets, and Valor had caught one. They passed the flickering diner sign and the half-buried nativity scene until Ethan saw what had stopped him, a shape beneath the skeletal frame of a snow-laden bench at the corner of Pine and Alder. At first it looked like nothing more than a dark mound, where the wind had sculpted the snow differently. But as Ethan's flashlight beam sliced across it, the shape gained definition. Cloth stiffened with ice, the outline of a leg curled inward, a small arm limp against whiteness. His pulse kicked hard, adrenaline breaking through the slow rhythm the storm had forced on his body. Jesus. The word cracked out before he could stop it, torn away by the wind. He dropped to one knee, sweeping snow away with frantic strokes of his glove. The flashlight beam trembled as his hands worked. Underneath lay a young woman, her face pale to the edge of translucence, dark hair matted with frost. Her body curled protectively around something smaller. A child, pressed into her chest, wrapped in the torn remains of a blanket that had lost its battle against the cold hours ago. For a moment, Ethan felt a terrible lurch in his stomach, the echo of too many nights in ER corridors where cold meant final. But then, so faint he thought he had imagined it, the child's lips quivered. A thread of sound, not even a cry, slipped out, the ghost of breath. "Alive," Ethan muttered, more to steady himself than to report. "They're alive." Valor pressed closer, his bulk a shield against the wind. The dog's breath fell warm across the child's cheek, melting frost crystals into tiny rivers. The growl had vanished, replaced by an urgent whine as Valor nudged the blanket with his nose, insisting Ethan act faster. "I know, buddy, I know." Ethan's voice was sharp with urgency now. He tugged at his radio, clicking into the channel. Static roared. Then the dispatcher's clipped tones cut through. He rattled off coordinates, words tight and stripped of emotion. 2 victims. Exposure. Critical. I need an ambulance at Pine and Alder. Repeat. Critical. Snow stung his eyes as he shoved the radio back and worked at the blanket. His fingers were clumsy in the gloves, so he tore them off, ignoring the instant sting of cold on skin. The child, boy, maybe 2 years old, was curled tight, face gray but not still. Ethan pressed 2 fingers to the tiny neck and felt it, a flutter, fragile, but there. "That's it, little man. Stay with me." He shrugged off his parka, wrapping it around both mother and child, pulling the fabric tight until his own arms trembled with cold. The woman's eyelids flickered as he shifted her, lashes crusted with ice, lips parted. For a moment, he thought she would slip away into the storm, but Valor pushed his muzzle firmly against her wrist, as if reminding her body to keep fighting. Her eyes cracked open. Dark irises rolled unfocused, then settled faintly on the shape of the dog. A whisper rasped out, so soft, Ethan bent close to hear it. "Mateo." The name stuck to the air like a prayer. Ethan followed her gaze down to the child, who stirred weakly under the press of Valor's warmth. "I've got him," Ethan said firmly, voice steadying into command tone, though his heart still hammered. "He's okay. We've got you both." The woman's eyes slid shut again, but a tear traced down her cheek, half frozen, half liquid, as if her body had surrendered the fight, but her soul refused to let go. The wail of sirens, distant and muffled by snow, began to seep into the storm. Ethan adjusted his hold, pressing the boy tighter to Valor's flank, so the dog's body heat could seep into him. The shepherd lay down in the snow deliberately, curling his frame around the child like a living furnace. Each puff of his breath fogged the boy's tiny face, coaxing a faint gasp, then another. Ethan knelt beside them, one hand on the child's back, the other gripping the woman's shoulder. Snow piled against his bare fingers, numbing them, but he didn't care. The storm roared, indifferent, but in the small circle carved by flashlight, dog, and desperate will, life pushed back against death with every weak breath that still managed to rise. "Hold on," Ethan murmured, bending so his forehead nearly touched Valor's. "Just hold on. Help's coming." The bench creaked under the weight of snow, wind screaming through empty streets, but Ethan barely heard it. His world had narrowed to 3 heartbeats, his own pounding, Valor's steady, and the faint, irregular pulse beneath his fingertips. That fragile rhythm was enough to change everything. And in that frozen intersection, amid the storm's attempt to erase the world, Ethan Cole realized this night would not end as just another patrol. Something had been placed in his care. 2 broken lives on the edge of being extinguished, and he would not let the storm have them. Not while he had strength. Not while Valor still breathed warm against the boy's face. The faint gasp came again, then another, a thread of life pulling itself back from the snow. Ethan exhaled a sharp cloud and set his jaw. We're not losing anyone tonight. The storm did not pause for miracles. It raged on, roaring through the empty streets of Everpine, bending lampposts until their light swayed in sick arcs across the snow. Ethan Cole crouched low, parka stripped from his back, arms rigid as he fought the cold to secure mother and child beneath the thick folds. His voice was in his radio, clipped and urgent, fighting against the static. Dispatch. This is Cole. 2 victims. Severe hypothermia. I need an immediate ambulance response at Pine and Alder. Mother and child. Repeat. Mother and child. Critical condition. The reply crackled through, nearly lost in the gale. Copy that, Unit 7. Paramedics en route. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes. In weather like this, 12 minutes might as well be 12 years. Hypothermia stole lives in silence, and he could see it working now, the mother's lips bluing darker by the second, the child's breaths shallow, like the faint flutter of a moth's wings. Ethan bit down in panic, forcing his hands steady. He snapped open the emergency kit strapped to his patrol belt. The foil blanket whipped in the wind like a frightened bird, nearly ripped from his grasp until he pinned it with one knee. He tucked it tight around the boy, layering it beneath the bulk of his parka. Then, with practiced precision, he pressed the small body against Vala's flank. "Stay," he commanded softly, though the dog didn't need telling. Vala shifted his weight, curling his body so that every inch of warmth pressed against the toddler. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, pushing hot breath into the child's face. The shepherd's eyes, dark, alert, unyielding, never left Ethan's. The boy stirred. It was barely movement, the twitch of a hand, the faintest roll of his head against the blanket, but then a sound rose, thin, weak, but unmistakable. A gasp, a fragile attempt to inhale life back into lungs that had nearly given up. Ethan froze, breath caught in his throat. Then his heart hammered with relief so hard it felt like pain. "That's it, little man. That's it. Keep breathing." The storm shrieked, snow stinging his bare hands as he adjusted the blanket tighter around both victims. His fingers burned first, then went numb, but he forced them to move. Every instinct screamed to hurry, to protect, to anchor these 2 fragile souls against a world trying to erase them. The mother stirred faintly, lips parting. Her whisper was lost in the wind, but Ethan leaned closer. She wasn't speaking in English. It was Spanish, soft, stumbling. He caught only fragments, but the meaning was clear. A prayer, a mother begging God not to take her child. "You're not alone," Ethan said firmly, letting his voice cut into her fading consciousness. "He's breathing. You hear me? He's still breathing." For a fleeting second, her eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze met Vala first. The dog's head rested against her arm, muzzle pressed steady, as if he were pinning her to life itself. Tears formed in her eyes, freezing at the edges before they could fall. Then her gaze shifted to Ethan, and though her lips didn't move, he understood the word she tried to give him. "Please." The siren wailed faintly in the distance. It should have been reassuring, but to Ethan, it was a cruel reminder of time. 12 minutes was still too long. He had to make those 12 minutes survivable. He stripped his scarf, wrapping it around the child's head, tucking the wool beneath Vala's jaw so that warmth funneled inward. He pressed his own body against the woman's side, trying to share heat, though the cold sank through him like knives. "Stay with me," he repeated, over and over, the words as much for himself as for them. The boy twitched again. A faint whimper escaped his lips, followed by another gasp that scraped the silence like flint against stone. It wasn't a cry. Not yet. But it was sound. It was proof of a fight. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to gather the boy up, to run with him through the storm. But Vala's body heat was doing what Ethan alone could not. The shepherd had become a furnace, steady and unyielding. Minutes blurred. Ethan kept glancing up the street, praying for headlights, cursing the snow that buried every road in silence. He checked the child's pulse again. 2 fingers against the tiny throat. Still fluttering. Still there. Valor shifted only once, to press closer, muzzle nudging the scarf higher, as if correcting Ethan's clumsy attempt. The boy's lips parted, pulling in another fragile breath. The faintest sound of air whistled from him, and Ethan felt the crushing weight on his chest loosen. "Good boy," Ethan whispered to Valor, voice breaking around the edges. "Good boy." The siren grew louder now, winding through the storm like a thread of salvation. Blue and red lights cut faintly through the white, refracted, scattered, but growing nearer. Ethan exhaled a cloud of frost and leaned close to the woman again. "Help's here. You hear me? You made it." Her eyes fluttered. The corners of her mouth twitched upward. Not a smile, not really, but the shadow of one, the ghost of hope. The ambulance skidded into view, headlights glaring against snow. Paramedics spilled out, hunched against the wind, sled stretchers dragged behind them. Their voices shouted questions Ethan barely registered. He handed them details in clipped bursts. Severe hypothermia, child unresponsive but breathing, mother semi-conscious, as his hands worked to transfer them from Valor's heat to the waiting blankets and monitors. But as the medics lifted the child, Valor barked once, sharp and loud, the sound cracking against the storm. It wasn't aggression, it was insistence, a soldier's protest at being relieved of duty. The boy's small hand twitched and landed against Valor's fur as they moved him, fingers curling weakly. "Easy, boy," Ethan soothed, holding Valor back, though his own chest felt the same pull. The paramedics loaded both onto the sled, strapping them in with mechanical efficiency. Oxygen mask on the boy, warmed IV line for the mother. Their voices were firm, rapid, confident, life being wrestled back from death in practiced hands. Ethan rose slowly, knees stiff, body trembling with cold that no longer mattered. He placed his hand on Valor's head, grounding himself. The dog leaned into him, eyes still locked on the retreating stretcher, as though his watch had not yet ended. The ambulance doors slammed. The siren screamed again, louder this time, desperate and alive. And as the flashing lights cut through the storm, Ethan knew the night had shifted. This was no longer just patrol, no longer just routine. Something had been placed in his hands, fragile, desperate, unfinished. He looked down at Valor, snow frozen into the dog's fur, chest heaving. Ethan's voice was hoarse, but it carried conviction. "We saved them tonight," he said quietly, "but this isn't over, not by a long shot." The dog's ears pricked, eyes still locked on the path where the ambulance vanished into white. A vow unspoken passed between them, loyalty and devotion carried through the storm, and in that vow, the larger story began. The storm chased them all the way to the hospital, battering against the ambulance doors as if unwilling to let go. When the gurneys burst through the sliding entrance of Everpine General, the sterile warmth of the emergency room collided with the feral breath of the blizzard. Snowflakes clung to coats, melted into rivulets on tile, left behind a trail of water like ghostly footprints. The doors sealed shut again, muting the roar outside, but the chaos inside quickly filled the silence. "Hypothermia. 2 patients, mother and child," a paramedic barked, pushing past the triage desk. "Estimated exposure, hours. Both alive, but borderline." Doctors and nurses swarmed instantly, a choreography Ethan had seen before. Swift hands, snapping gloves into place, scissors flashing to cut through frozen fabric, machines wheeled into position with metallic clatters. The child, Mateo, was taken first. A pediatric team crowded the tiny form, their voices rising in clipped orders. "Oxygen at 2 liters. Warm IV. Get it going now. Core temperatures barely above 88. We need active rewarming." The mother followed close, limp against the gurney. A nurse called vitals, as monitors came alive in harsh beeps. The woman's lips were blue, eyelids fluttering with shallow awareness, but the steady thrum of a heartbeat registered, thin but defiant. Ethan stood just inside the door, snow dripping from his uniform, radio still crackling faintly on his shoulder. For a long moment, he didn't move. His body was here, rooted to the tile, but his mind slipped backward, years folding into seconds. He knew this place too well. Claire. He saw her again, as if time had not passed, her body on a stretcher under the same fluorescent glare, the heart monitor flattening despite the chaos of hands working desperately above her. The smell of antiseptic, the rustle of paper gowns, the helplessness in his chest. That night, routine had ended the same way storms ended, suddenly, brutally, leaving silence behind. He forced himself back into the present, jaw tightening. This was not Claire, and tonight at least, he had dragged life in from the snow, rather than watching it slip away. At his side, Vala sat motionless, a sentinel carved out of shadow and light. The shepherd had followed them through the storm, refusing to leave the ambulance's rear step until Ethan tugged him down. Now, inside the warmth of the ER, he stayed fixed by the door, eyes sharp, chest rising steady. The bustle of doctors and nurses barely registered with him. His gaze never left the gurney that carried Matteo. The boy whimpered once, faint but audible, as warm IV fluids slid into his veins. The sound cut through the air like the first note of a hymn. Nurses glanced up, relief flickering across their faces. A young nurse, hair pulled back in a tight bun, glanced toward the door and saw Vala stationed there. She paused, lowering her voice to the colleague at her side, but the words carried just enough. That dog saved the boy's life. Ethan's eyes snapped to her. He opened his mouth to deflect, to give credit to paramedics or protocols, but no words came, because it was true. Without Vala pressing warmth into that fragile body, there would be no heartbeat here, no tiny gasp for the monitors to catch. His throat tightened. He reached down, fingers brushing Vala's head. The shepherd leaned gently into the touch, a quiet acknowledgement, as if saying, "We're not done yet." Another nurse hurried past with heated blankets brushing Ethan's arm. "Sir, you need to stay clear of the crash bay," she said briskly, though her tone softened when she noticed his dripping uniform and pale face. "We've got them now. You did your job." He wanted to argue, wanted to stay at Matteo's side, to keep the thread of connection from breaking, but he knew the boundaries. So he took a half step back, standing beside Vala like a soldier waiting for orders. His chest still heaved with adrenaline, sweat cooling under damp layers, the storm's cold lodged deep in his bones. Through the glass of the observation bay, he watched Anna's body jolt faintly as warmed IV pushed into her veins. He watched Matteo's tiny chest rise beneath the oxygen mask, each movement still fragile but real. Machines beeped in uneven chorus, not yet steady but no longer fading. It was a strange inversion of memory. Where once he had watched monitors flatline, now he watched them stubbornly climb. The déjà vu pressed against his ribs with equal parts pain and relief. Behind him, Vala gave a soft chuff, shifting only to resettle closer to the glass, as though guarding the boundary between survival and loss. Several people passed, casting glances at the dog. None tried to move him. His stillness carried authority, even without words. Ethan let out a slow breath, his voice barely audible. Not tonight. And for the first time in years, the hospital's chaos did not feel like an ending. It felt like the fragile beginning of something he could not yet name. The ER had quieted into its second rhythm, the urgent chaos giving way to the steady hum of machines and the murmur of watchful nurses. Ethan stood just beyond the glass wall, Valor planted at his side like a statue, eyes never leaving the gurney, where the boy slept beneath layers of warming blankets. The mother, her chart now labeled Rivera, Anna, approx 27, lay in the bed beside him, her breaths shallow, but more consistent than they had been in the storm. Ethan leaned against the wall, every muscle taut, though exhaustion pressed at him. He had seen countless cases in this hospital, each one filed and recorded in his memory with the precision of a man who believed order could make sense of chaos. But when he glanced at Ana Rivera's face under the harsh fluorescent light, his gut tugged at something buried deeper. A recognition, faint but undeniable. He reached for his phone, thumb scrolling through the digital log of old case notes. His career had left him with a mental filing cabinet of names and tragedies, and he knew better than to ignore instinct when it whispered. He typed slowly, almost reluctantly. Rivera, Anna, missing persons. 3 years ago. The result appeared within seconds, a cold case file, half forgotten in the system, but etched in his memory now that it surfaced. Ana Rivera, reported missing at age 24. Last known location, Casper, Wyoming. Circumstances: fled domestic situation after filing accusations of abuse against boyfriend Daniel Mercer, age 30. Court proceedings collapsed when Anna vanished before testimony. The words on the screen blurred for a moment, the way they always did when cruelty found its way into bureaucracy. Ethan scrolled deeper, attached photos, smiling, younger, hair longer, but unmistakably the same face lying pale on the hospital bed now. The same dark eyes, though in the file they shone with life instead of half-closed exhaustion. God, Ethan muttered, more breath than word. He closed his eyes for half a beat, then looked again as if repetition could erase doubt. It didn't. He straightened, gaze moving from the file to the bed, then back. Valor picked up the shift in his body and chuffed softly, tail sweeping the floor once. Ethan crouched beside the dog, one hand brushing his ear. "It's her," he whispered. "It's really her." As if on cue, a nurse passed carrying a tray of supplies. Ethan caught her gently by the arm. "Her name's Ana Rivera. She's been missing for 3 years." The nurse blinked, startled. "You're sure?" He held up the file on his phone, letting the photo speak for itself. The nurse's expression shifted instantly, from mere concern to a sharp awareness that filled the air with a new weight. She nodded quickly and hurried off to update the attending physician. Ethan's eyes dropped back to Anna. Her wrist lay exposed where the blanket had slipped, the skin pale against the white sheets. That's when he saw it. Faint, blurred with time and weather, but still there, a tattoo. It was small, no bigger than 2 fingers' width, a crude line of ink, the outline of a star broken in half. He felt his chest tighten. He had seen that mark before, 2 winters ago, in another case file, tied to a human trafficking investigation that had collapsed under lack of testimony. Several victims carried the same symbol, branded like cattle, an identifier used by a network that operated in the shadows of shelters and halfway houses. They had called it the Starfall mark, an emblem of ownership for women pulled into traps they could not escape. The sight of it on Anna's wrist made his pulse slam hard against his ribs. This wasn't random. She hadn't simply wandered into the storm and collapsed on a bench. She had been running, again. Running from the same darkness that had claimed her 3 years ago. And somehow, by chance or providence, the blizzard had driven her path across his. He stared at the tattoo until his vision blurred. Memory cascaded, interviews with broken women too scared to testify, grainy photographs of missing faces, police reports filled with the same unanswered questions. He had assumed many of those threads were lost forever. Now one of them lay breathing under a hospital blanket, alive against every odd. Valor shifted beside him, pressing his head into Ethan's knee as if grounding him back into the present. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing himself steady. He could not afford to let emotion cloud judgment, not now. He tapped the screen of his phone again, scrolling to the investigative notes from that trafficking case. His eyes caught on a detail, cross-referenced names, aliases, places, a list of shelters flagged for suspicious activity, and one name repeated more than once, Daniel Mercer. Ethan's pulse spiked. Mercer, the boyfriend, not just an abuser, a link to something larger, something systemic. He looked again at Anna, her chest rising and falling with fragile persistence. The boy, Matteo, she had whispered, stirred faintly, a hand twitching against the blankets. Ethan's throat tightened. They had been running for more than survival. They had been running from a machine built to consume lives like theirs. "This isn't random," Ethan said under his breath, words shaped sharp. "This storm didn't just throw her in my path. Something's moving out there." Valor's ears flicked at his tone, the shepherd's eyes narrowing toward the hallway, as if sensing the enemy Ethan couldn't yet see. Ethan closed the case file, locking the screen with a decisive click. His chest felt heavier now, but not from despair. It was a weight of another kind, the kind that came with realizing a quiet patrol had just become something much larger, something far more dangerous. He placed a steady hand on Valor's head, fingers sinking into thick fur. "We found her," he murmured. "But finding her might be the easy part." The machines in the ER beeped on, steady but fragile, like hearts refusing to quit. And in the sterile glow of that hospital, Ethan Cole understood that the night storm had only opened the first door. What lay beyond would test every scar he carried. The fluorescent hum of the ER never changed. It was constant, sterile, an artificial rhythm meant to convince the living that order ruled here. For hours, Ethan Cole had sat in the chair pulled close to the observation window. Valor lying at his feet like a sentinel carved from shadow. Nurses drifted in and out, checking vitals, adjusting lines, speaking in hushed voices. But Ethan's eyes never strayed far from the bed where Anna Rivera lay beneath thin hospital blankets, her skin still the color of paper, her breaths shallow but steady. It was nearing dawn when she stirred. The first flicker came in her hands, trembling slightly against the sheet as if her body tested the air before rejoining it. Then her eyelids fought against the heaviness, lashes fluttering like fragile wings until, with a shudder, her eyes opened. Confusion filled them first, a glassy disorientation that often followed long exposure and exhaustion. She blinked against the brightness overhead, her lips parting as though trying to form words, but producing only the faint rasp of breath. Ethan rose immediately, heart thudding with equal parts relief and caution. "Anna," he said quietly, using her name deliberately, as if it might tether her to the present. "You're safe. You're at Everpine General. You made it." Her gaze wavered, focusing first on the unfamiliar ceiling, then on the IV lines at her arm, the monitor pulsing beside her bed. Then her eyes fell on him, uniform, badge, gun at his hip. The reaction was instant and violent. She flinched hard, shoulders jerking against the bed, breath catching in a sharp gasp. Her eyes widened with raw terror, recognition sparking, as if every muscle remembered what her voice could not yet say. Panic consumed her face. the panic of someone who had trusted the wrong uniform before. "No," the word cracked out, hoarse but laced with desperation. Her arms struggled weakly against the blankets, trying to pull free, to retreat from him, even if there was nowhere left to go. Her body betrayed her, frail and trembling, but her will was unmistakable. She would rather collapse again than be caught in the grip of authority she couldn't trust. Ethan froze. He lifted his hands, palms open, voice low and steady. "Anna, listen. I'm not here to hurt you. You're safe here. I promise you're safe." But the word safe seemed to ricochet off her like a stone against glass. Her breaths quickened, bordering on sobs, head thrashing as though the walls themselves were closing in. The monitor beeped louder, reflecting her rising heart rate. It was Valor who moved. The shepherd rose from the floor without hesitation, padded forward, and pressed his head gently onto her wrist, where the IV line trailed. His weight was firm, but not heavy, grounding. His dark eyes lifted to hers, unblinking, steady in a way no words could manage. Anna froze mid-struggle, her chest heaving, her gaze locked on the dogs, recognition dawning not of name or past, but of instinct. She had felt that muzzle against her in the snow, had known its warmth when the world threatened to erase her and her son. In Valor's eyes there was no authority, no demand, no threat, only presence. Her resistance cracked. Her trembling eased, though tears began to well, sliding down her temples into her hair. She lifted her free hand with fragile hesitation, fingers hovering uncertainly before brushing against the dog's fur. Valor didn't flinch. He leaned into the touch, pressing closer, his breath warm against her chilled skin. A soft sob escaped her throat, no longer panicked but broken, as though the dam of survival had finally given way. She turned her face slightly toward the pillow, tears spilling silently. Ethan stood rooted, throat tight, watching the transformation he could never have commanded. He had walked people back from ledges with calm words, had escalated standoffs with nothing but tone, but nothing in his arsenal compared to what Valor had just done with a single gesture. He eased closer, careful not to intrude. His voice softened to something nearer prayer than command. "He's been with you since the storm. He wouldn't leave you. Neither will I." Anna's breathing was steadied by fractions, though tears continued to slip. Her fingers tangled weakly in Valor's fur, gripping as if the dog anchored her to the world. For long minutes the room existed in that fragile balance, the hum of machines, the muffled storm still clawing at the windows outside, the quiet presence of a woman relearning what trust felt like. Ethan didn't break the silence. He let Valor's weight do what his words could not. Finally, her voice emerged, thin and rasping. "Mateo." Ethan leaned closer, nodding. "He's here. He's safe. The doctors are with him, just in the next room. He's warm, and he's breathing. You don't have to fight alone anymore." Her lips parted, trembling around the effort to believe. She looked from Ethan back to Valor, and though fear lingered in her eyes, it no longer consumed them. The tears that fell now were quieter, not born of panic, but of release. The first crack of light through walls built high and thick. Ethan swallowed hard, his own chest aching at the sight. He remembered the helpless nights when Claire's strength had failed in hospital rooms, just like this, the futility of begging for one more day. Tonight, though, he had carried someone back across that line. Tonight, trust had begun. Not with him, but with the dog who had never broken it. He stepped back slowly, giving her space, allowing Valor to remain close against her wrist. His voice was firm, but gentle. "Rest now. We'll explain everything later. You're safe." This time, the word did not ricochet. It settled, fragile but possible, in the silence that followed. The storm had eased when Ethan steered the county truck up Pine Ridge. Snow still fell, but the wind had lost its teeth. In the passenger seat, Anna sat silent, swallowed in a coat too big for her. Mateo slept across her lap, small hand gripping the hospital blanket with stubborn will. Valor sat upright in back, gaze fixed forward, as if he knew exactly where they were headed. At last the cabin appeared, roof buried in snow, chimney faintly smoking. Once it had been Ethan and Claire's dream, every nail hammered with laughter. Now it stood like a monument, half sanctuary, half grave. He parked, lifted Mateo carefully, feather light in his arms. Valor dropped to the ground and fell into step. Inside, warmth and cedar smoke rushed to meet them. Ethan laid Mateo on the sofa near the stove and pulled Claire's old wool blanket around him. The boy stirred, fingers fumbling until they found Valor's fur. His grip locked, and he sighed. Valor didn't move, only rested his muzzle close, as though anchoring him. Anna collapsed into the armchair opposite, eyes fixed on her son. But when she saw his hand clutching the shepherd, something softened. For the first time since the hospital, her shoulders eased. Ethan stoked the fire, poured hot water into mugs. The cabin still smelled faintly of lavender sachets Claire had once tucked into drawers. Her photographs lingered on the mantel, her quilt folded at the bed. These ghosts had been enough for years. Now, with Anna and Mateo inside, the space felt altered, waiting for new voices. "Thank you," Anna whispered suddenly. The words cracked from disuse, but they landed heavy. Ethan only nodded. Silence filled the cabin, broken by fire crackle and Mateo's breathing. At last, Anna spoke again, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have brought me here. They'll find me. They always do." She told him. Shelters, churches, even police had betrayed her. Names sold, locations whispered, cars idling at night. Every time she grabbed Mateo and run. "I'm so tired of running," she confessed. "But I don't know how to stop." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You did what you had to. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive." She laughed bitterly. "Alive? Do you know how exhausting it is just to be alive?" Tears streaked her cheeks. Every day waiting for the wrong face. Every night wondering if they'll take my son. Ethan drew a breath. "I know something about being tired of running." He told her of Claire, laughing one moment, on the floor the next. CPR until his arms failed. By the time they reached the hospital, nothing left to save. After that, I stopped living. Patrol and silence were all I could stand. And Valor. He kept me moving when I didn't want to. Anna listened, her arms wrapped tighter around herself, but her tears now carried recognition. "So you know," she whispered. "I know what it feels like to lose the person who made the world make sense," he said. "And I know the silence that follows can be worse than the loss." For a long time they sat without speaking. Then Valor rose, padded to Anna, and pressed his head into her lap. Her hand trembled, then settled on his fur. Tears spilled softer now, not from fear, but relief. "He doesn't let go, does he?" she whispered. "Not once," Ethan said. In the firelight, their faces carried different scars, but the same weariness. And for the first time, silence felt like understanding. Hours passed. The storm outside faded to whispers along the eaves. Ethan dozed lightly by the stove, Anna still upright in the armchair, her eyes locked on her son. Matteo lay cocooned in wool, hand still gripping Vala's fur. The shepherd had barely moved, his patience endless, his body a wall against all that threatened the child. Ethan had seen traumatized children before, their voices stolen by fear. He hadn't expected more than silence from Matteo tonight. But then, in the hush of firelight, the boy stirred. His lips parted, breath shallow. At first, Ethan thought it was a dream sound. Then came the whisper, thin, shaky, but clear enough to pierce the night. "Doggy. Safe." Anna froze, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears burst from her eyes. Months of silence, shattered by 2 words. "Doggy safe," Matteo murmured again, his fingers tightening in Vala's fur. Vala didn't move. He only pressed closer, exhaling into the boy's hand as if sealing the vow. Anna slid to her knees beside the sofa, whispering through sobs. "Matteo, mi niño, you spoke." She kissed his temple, her tears falling freely. Ethan swallowed hard. He had witnessed courtroom victories, survivors reclaiming voices. But nothing compared to this. 2 words from a child, fragile yet defiant, enough to redraw the boundaries of despair. "You did that, partner," he murmured to Vala. The firelight held the scene. A mother's tears, a child's whispered trust, a dog's unflinching loyalty. It was more than survival. It was the first breath of hope. Anna looked up, face wet, but radiant. "He hasn't spoken in months. I thought they'd stolen even his voice. And the first words he says are about trust." Her gaze locked with Ethan's. "Do you see what this means? He feels safe here." "He feels safe with your dog," Ethan nodded. His voice was low, steady. "Yeah, I see. They stayed that way. Mother kneeling, child sleeping, dog guarding, man watching. And for the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel like a monument to loss. It felt like the beginning of home. Morning arrived on Pine Ridge with deceptive gentleness. The storm had raged all night, carving drifts along the ridges and burying the trees, but now the mountains glistened under sunlight as if nothing violent had ever passed. Smoke curled from the cabin chimney. For the first time in days, stillness felt like peace. Inside, warmth gathered around the stove. Matteo slept on the rug, his small body curled against Valor's flank. The shepherd's tail thumped once, even in sleep, as if reminding the world of his duty. At the table, Anna sat with a steaming mug Ethan had pressed into her hands. Her eyes were still shadowed, but softened now by a trace of relief. Ethan stood at the window watching sunlight fracture on the snow. For a moment, he let himself believe the storm had bought them time. Then came the knock. It wasn't tentative. It was sharp, deliberate. 3 raps that rattled the door and split the calm like an axe. Vala's ears shot up, body rigid before the second knock landed. A growl rumbled from his chest, low and dangerous. Anna's mug clattered, her face drained. "No," she whispered. "They found us." Ethan raised a hand for silence and crossed to the door. He opened it with a cautious crack. A man stood on the porch, snow dusting his parka. His face was lean, glasses glinting beneath the hood, his smile practiced and cold. He held a leather portfolio, the kind of case carried by bureaucrats. "Good morning," the man said smoothly. "Name's Mr. Alton, Child Protective Services." He flicked a badge case open and shut in one swift motion, too fast to study. "We've had a report of unsafe conditions here." I'll need to take custody of the child. Ethan's grip tightened on the door. His voice was calm, but iron underlined it. At this hour, in this storm. What office did you say? CPS, Alton repeated, sharper now. The boy, Mateo, is it? Needs to come with me, immediately. Valor rose to his feet, planting himself forward, growling and deepening. Mateo stirred at the sound, his hand clenching in the shepherd's fur. Anna stood frozen, white-faced. Something was off. The badge flash had been too quick. The portfolio looked too new, and no CPS worker would hike into the mountains after a record blizzard without deputies or local law enforcement. Why don't you step inside? Ethan said lightly, masking his calculation. Show me your paperwork. Alton shook his head. Regulations don't require me to enter an unsafe home. The boy comes with me. Deemed unsafe? Ethan asked. Funny, you haven't looked inside. Alton's smile sharpened. Some things don't need looking at, Officer Cole. The use of his name struck harder than the cold air. Ethan kept his expression still, but his pulse ticked faster. This was no random bureaucrat. Listen carefully, Alton said, voice dropping. Hand over the boy, and there doesn't have to be trouble. No reports, no court orders. Quiet. Behind Ethan, Anna gasped, Valor pressing closer, growl climbing like a storm breaking. Ethan met the man's gaze, voice steady. You're going to want to leave my porch. Alton's mask slipped, eyes sharpening. You'll regret this. The morning peace was gone. Danger had stepped through the storm's silence and stood at their door. Paperwork, Ethan said again, hand firm on the frame. Let's see it. Alton hesitated, then drew a folded document from his case and held it up between two gloved fingers. Signed by Judge Weaver in Cheyenne. Custody transfer authorization. Ethan took it, angling his body to block the man's view inside. Valor pressed tighter against his leg, the growl vibrating through the floor. The letterhead looked right, but the font was too clean, too modern. His jaw tightened. He scanned the text. Judge Weaver's name, a supposed order number, an address. Except the regional office wasn't an office at all, just a P.O. box. And Weaver's signature, Ethan had seen it before, was wrong, copied, almost traced. You tried hard, Ethan murmured, folding the paper. But not hard enough. Alton's brows lifted. Excuse me? Valor moved forward, hackles bristling, eyes fixed. Anna whispered from behind the table, her voice cracked but unmistakable. Him. Ethan stepped closer to the doorway. He could smell cologne under the man's parka. His words were calm, deliberate. This paper's fake. Judge Weaver doesn't sign custody orders without hearings, and he doesn't authorize transfers to P.O. boxes. You've got 5 seconds to leave before I call the sheriff and add forgery to the list. Alton's jaw flexed. You're making a mistake, Officer Cole. The boy belongs in custody. Cooperate, or I'll return with more authority. Ethan leaned forward, voice low. You're not in state. You're not a county. You're no one with authority that holds up in daylight. And if you set one boot across this threshold, Valor won't wait for me. As if on cue, Valor lunged one step, teeth flashing. His bark cracked the morning like a gunshot. Mateo whimpered in his sleep, but clung tighter to the dog. For the first time, Alton flinched. His voice lost its polish. You'll regret this. You and that woman both. Ethan shoved the paper back into his chest. Take your forgery. Don't come back unless you want a squad car on your heels. Alton snatched the document, shoved it into his case and turned. Snow crunched as he strode away. Moments later, an engine revved beyond the tree line, then faded into silence. Ethan kept the door open, staring into the white road until the sound was gone. Only then did he close it and bolt it. The cabin exhaled, but tension hung like smoke. Vala lay back at Mateo's side, but his eyes never left the door. Anna's breath broke into a sob. "That was him," she whispered. "One of them." "I told you they'd find me." Ethan crouched, steadying his voice. "Now we know who's looking. He wanted to scare you. But what he did, that's evidence." Her tears streaked silently, fear edged with something new. Anger. Valor pressed against her legs, grounding her. "He found us," she said bitterly. "After all this time, he found us." "Yes," Ethan said, "which means it isn't random anymore. They're moving, testing, and now we know." He rested a hand over hers, where it clutched Vala's fur. "We're not blind anymore. We've seen his face. We have his paperwork. That's leverage." But even as he said it, the truth pressed heavier. Alton's visit wasn't a probe. It was a message. The network Anna had escaped wasn't content with whispers. They were sending men to her door. If Alton had reached the ridge this morning, more would follow. Mateo stirred on the couch, face tightening in a dream, a small whimper escaping. Anna rushed to him, panic rising, but Ethan steadied her. "He's safe. Right now, he's safe. As long as Valor and I are here, he stays that way." For the first time, Anna let herself lean into his words, fragile but real. The fire popped in the stove, sparking brushing glass. Smoke mingled with the cold air leaking through the frame. Ethan's eyes hardened. This wasn't a chance. It was a pursuit. He looked at Vala, who stood watch, hackles raised, gaze fixed on the door. The dog hadn't relaxed since the first knock. Instinct told him what his mind already knew. They had been marked. His voice dropped, meant for both woman and dog. "We'll prepare. We'll fight smart. But danger isn't coming. It's already here," Anna whispered again, as if the words themselves branded the truth. "That's him. One of them." And Ethan, standing in the glow of firelight with storm silence pressing at the windows, accepted what had begun. Their sanctuary was no longer hidden. The war had found them. The cabin had gone still again, though the air no longer carried peace. After Alton's departure, Anna had drifted into shallow sleep beside Mateo, her hand draped protectively over the boy. Vala lay stretched across the doorway like a barricade, ears twitching even in rest. Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table, the lamp angled over his laptop. The fire crackled in the stove, but its warmth felt distant. Patrol instincts had kept him alive for years, but instinct wasn't enough anymore. Not against Alton, not against the network that had hunted Anna across states and years. Tonight he needed proof. He began with the forged document still tucked in his jacket. He'd scanned it at the sheriff's office under the pretense of following up on paperwork. Now the image filled his screen. Judge Weaver's signature bled faintly at the edges. Evidence of forgery. But the header told more. Cheyenne Regional Office, Child Protective Services. Ethan cross-checked the listing. No such office existed. The only address tied to it was a P.O. box. He dug deeper into databases most people never saw, cross-referencing names and aliases. Then it appeared. Alton, Richard. No CPS record. No government employment. But buried in an interagency report. Alias flagged in a trafficking investigation. 2018. Possible recruiter. Detained once. Released for lack of evidence. Ethan's pulse quickened. Another note tied him to 2 missing women in Denver, shelter residents who had vanished without a trace. The report called the suspicion credible. No charges filed. The women were never found. He pulled up an old file of his own, missing women and children across Wyoming and Colorado. Most cases were written off as runaways. But as Ethan scrolled, the threads tightened. A girl vanished from a Cheyenne shelter. A mother, last seen at a Laramie halfway house. 2 sisters taken from a Fort Collins outreach program. The pattern sharpened. Shelters, halfway houses, churches. Places meant for safety twisted into hunting grounds. He filled a notepad with names, dates, arrows. The same institutions surfaced again and again, tied to anonymous funding or flimsy resumes. In the margins of multiple reports, one chilling phrase repeated: possible, organized network. Ethan rubbed his temples, exhaustion gnawing, but adrenaline driving him forward. He searched Alton's aliases: R. Alton, Richard Allen, R. Altman. The same smoke without fire trail appeared. A warehouse lease in Denver that burned suspiciously. Testimony from a survivor who recanted under pressure. An unlicensed transport service in Oklahoma. Always released. Always slipping through cracks. One surveillance photo caught his breath. A man in a parka leaning against a van. Poor angle, half-shadowed. But the jawline, the wire-rimmed glasses. It was the man who had stood on his porch hours earlier. Valor stirred, sensing the shift in Ethan's breathing. "It's a system," Ethan whispered. "Not just one man. A system." He thought of Anna's voice. "They always find me." Of Mateo's small hand clutching Valor's fur. Of Alton's cold promise. "You'll regret this." Scrolling deeper, one name jolted him. Evergreen Outreach Shelter. A chain with branches in Denver, Cheyenne, Laramie. On paper, a charity. In reality, it appeared again and again in missing person files. And on its former staff list, Daniel Mercer, Anna's ex-boyfriend. Ethan stared at the screen. Mercer wasn't just an abuser. He was part of the machine, maybe even one of its architects. He looked toward the couch. Anna slept curled protectively around her son, fragile and worn, proof of survival and of the network's reach. Ethan brushed a hand over Valor's head. "We've walked into something bigger than both of us, but we're not backing down." Hours passed. Notes crowded Ethan's pad, arrows and names filling the page. The lamp flickered low. Behind him, Mateo slept. Anna shifted in uneasy dreams. But Valor did not rest. The shepherd paced, nails clicking on the floorboards. He stopped at the window, pressed his nose to the glass, circled back, then nudged Ethan's leg insistently. His eyes burned sharp in the lamplight. Urgent. He nosed Ethan's jacket, then the door. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Valor whined, tail stiff, body taut. He pawed the door, claws scraping wood. Ethan had learned never to ignore the dog's instincts. Valor had led him to hidden weapons, to survivors buried in rubble, to threats before they struck. If he was pressing now, it wasn't random. Ethan slipped on his jacket, flashlight in one pocket, hand brushing his sidearm. "All right, partner. Show me." At the words, Valor surged to the door, body forward, ready. Ethan eased it open, careful not to wake Anna or Mateo. Cold air swept in, sharp with pine. The mountain lay white and silent. They stepped out into moonlight. Snow glistened silver, shadows long and black. Valor trotted down the narrow track, nose low, glancing back impatiently until Ethan followed. At the fork, where the road met an old ranger trail, the dog halted. He sniffed the ground, then lifted his head, growl vibrating. He turned down the trail, paws sinking deep into powder. Ethan's pulse quickened. The trail ended at an abandoned ranger station he'd passed on patrols, a relic he'd written off. Tonight, he followed Valor into its shadows. The station hunched in snow, roof sagging, logs blackened with mildew. But something was wrong. The snow around it was disturbed. Fresh footprints, crisscrossing, human, recent. Valor pressed his nose to the door, hackles raised. He pawed once, urgent. Ethan leaned close. The lock was new, heavy-duty, far too clean for a ruin. Cold dread slid into his gut. He unclipped his sidearm and tried the handle. It resisted, then gave with a reluctant click. The smell hit first. Metallic, chemical, not rot, but something worse. He swept the flashlight inside. Tarps hung over the windows, sealing in light. A folding table sagged under papers and cheap laminates. A cot lay unmade in the corner. Food wrappers piled high. This wasn't abandoned. It was used. Recently. Ethan moved in cautiously. Valor pressed to his leg. The beam cut across the table. Photographs scattered like cards, driver's license shots, shelter IDs, young women with hollow eyes. Ethan picked one up. Marissa Lee, 19. Missing. Denver shelter. Another beneath it. Janelle Ortiz, 23. Cheyenne halfway house. Dozens more. Valor barked sharply, breaking the silence. Ethan swung his light to the far wall. A corkboard hung there, covered in more photos. Some slashed with red X's, others scribbled with notes. Transfer confirmed. Awaiting pickup. His stomach turned. This was a hub, a catalogue. On the table, half buried in papers, one photo froze him. Anna, younger, unscarred, but unmistakable. Her name scrawled beneath. Next to it, a note in black marker. Recovered asset, priority. Ethan's grip tightened until the wood creaked. Rage burned through his chest. None of this was random. Anna hadn't just escaped an abuser. She had slipped through the fingers of a system, and they wanted her back. Valor's growl rumbled like thunder, vibrating through the floor. Ethan forced himself to breathe, to move. He swept the table, gathering photos into a folder, snapping images with his phone. Then he saw the map pinned to the wall. Pushpins dotted Denver, Cheyenne, Laramie, Fort Collins. Lines connected them in a web. One pin sat alarmingly close to Everpine. "Damn it," Ethan whispered. He crouched as Valor pawed at the floorboards near the cot. Shining his light, he saw metal glint. He pried up a loose board and dragged out a case. Inside lay dozens of blank IDs, ready to be filled. Lives erased. Lives rewritten. He slammed it shut. The storm outside no longer felt like weather. It was cover for predators. Ethan turned once more to the wall. Anna's photo stared back, marked priority. His chest burned with fury. "They wanted her back," he whispered. "They're not getting her." Valor barked once, sharp, sealing the vow. Ethan tucked the folder under his arm and stepped out into the night. The forest lay silent, moonlight silvering the drifts. But he knew better. The ridge wasn't just home, it was a battlefield, and the enemy had already planted its flag. The sky over Pine Ridge had shifted from black to the washed-out gray of early morning. Snow blanketed the mountains, silence sharp as glass. Inside the cabin, the stove burned steady, wood snapping softly. The warmth should have been comfort. Instead, tension filled the air like static. Ethan spread the evidence across the table, the photos, laminated IDs, scribbled notes, the map dotted with pins. Stolen from the ranger station only hours earlier, they glowed under the lamp as if daring denial. Anna sat across from him, blanket tight around her shoulders. Mateo slept on the couch, Valor curled protectively at his side. But Anna's eyes never left the photographs. Her hands shook as she picked one up. A young woman stared back, dark eyes, hollow expression, a red X slashed across her face. Anna gasped and dropped it as if burned. "That's where I escaped." Ethan leaned forward. "The station?" She nodded quickly. "Not just that one. They move us, rotate us. But that place, I remember the smell, the tarps. They kept us there for weeks before." Her voice broke. She turned away, clutching the blanket tighter. Ethan didn't press. He slid another photo toward her. Her own. Marked priority. Her gaze froze. A violent shiver shook her body. "They'll never stop," she whispered. "I was never supposed to leave. I was theirs. And if they find me again—" Her eyes darted to the couch. "If they find him—" Her voice collapsed. Tears spilled. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Anna, you did leave. You survived. And now we have proof. Photos, IDs, their map. We can expose this." She shook her head, panic flashing. "No. You don't understand. The last time I told someone, they came that same night. There's no safety. Not in court, not in shelters. They always have someone inside." He let the silence stretch, then asked quietly, "So, what do you want to do?" "Keep hiding, keep running, because you know they won't stop. Not until someone says no more." The fire popped. Anna twisted the blanket until her knuckles went white. "I can't. I'm not strong enough." Valor stirred. The shepherd rose, padded across the room, and pressed against her knees. He laid his muzzle in her lap. Anna's breath hitched. Her hand sank into his fur, gripping as if to borrow his steadiness. Ethan's voice softened. "You don't have to be strong alone. You've already survived more than most people could imagine. That makes you stronger than you think. But now you have a choice. Keep hiding, or testify. If you speak, if you tell what you know, we can rip a hole in this network so wide they can't patch it. But it has to come from you." Anna closed her eyes, tears sliding unchecked. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by her quiet sobs. Valor didn't move. He waited, head heavy in her lap, eyes steady. Finally, Anna drew a trembling breath. She opened her eyes. Beneath the tears lived something harder. Resolve. "I'll do it," she whispered. Her voice wavered, but the words were solid. "Not just for me, for the others, for the ones who never got out." Relief surged in Ethan's chest, tempered by the danger ahead. But for the first time, they weren't just reacting. They were choosing. He laid a hand over hers. "Then we fight. Together." Anna looked at Valor, still pressed close, then at Mateo asleep on the couch. "We fight." From that moment, the cabin changed. It became a war room. Ethan's laptop never closed. His phone buzzed with messages from the sheriff's office, from state investigators, from a prosecutor 2 counties over. At night, under the blue glow of snow-lit moon, he sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, outlining times, names, Chains of custody. Each call ended the same way. Keep her safe. Get her ready. We'll be ready for court. Anna listened, though Ethan tried to shield her. Words like protection detail and sealed testimony floated across the table. Sometimes she flinched, sometimes her breath caught, but she didn't back away. When the calls ended, Ethan turned to her. His voice gentled. We have time, but not much. They'll want your story firsthand. Clear, steady, under oath. The defense will try to break you, twist your words. We can't let them. Anna nodded, though her hands shook in her lap. I don't know if I can say it out loud, not all of it. You don't have to be perfect, Ethan said. You just have to be truthful. That's stronger than anything they can throw at you. The first practice came late one night. The fire had burned low, the cabin silent except for wind tapping the eaves. Ethan placed a recorder on the table, his notepad open. Start where you need to, not where you think a court wants, where it matters most to you. Anna stared at the recorder, as if it were a weapon. Finally, with a trembling breath, she began. And it started with Daniel. He said he loved me. He said he wanted to protect me, but protection turned into control, and control turned into something worse. Her voice cracked. She glanced at Valor curled at her feet. He lifted his head, eyes steady. She brushed her fingers through his fur and pushed forward. When I tried to leave, he told me no one would believe me, that I was nothing, that I belonged to him. And when I finally told the police, when I said abuse, he laughed. He said he'd make sure I disappeared. Tears welled. Her hand covered her mouth. I can't. Not more tonight. Ethan switched the recorder off immediately. That's enough. One step at a time. She looked at him through tears. How will I stand in a courtroom when I can't finish a sentence here? Ethan gestured to Valor. The shepherd rose and pressed his muzzle into her lap. Anna let out a broken laugh. He thinks I can do it. He knows you can, Ethan said. And so do I. The second attempt came the next night. Anna managed more. The shelters that betrayed her, the vans that moved them in the dark, the faces of men who came when the lights were cut. Her words stumbled, cracked. But each time panic rose, Valor nudged her back, grounding her with the weight of his presence. By the third attempt, her voice carried something new. Still fragile, still shaking, but stronger. She spoke of the women she had known inside, the ones who whispered prayers and clung to each other through the nights. Some of them never made it out, she said, eyes fixed on the photos spread across the table. If I don't speak, their voices die with them. I can't let that happen. Ethan wrote notes quietly, but his gaze stayed on her. He could hear the fire beginning to kindle in her tone. Days passed. Practice became repetition. Repetition became resilience. Each night, Anna broke a little less, rebuilt a little faster. Each night, Valor anchored her, steady as stone. Finally, one evening, Ethan stopped the recorder and leaned back. That's it, he said. That's the testimony. Anna frowned through fresh tears. But I cried through half of it. Doesn't matter, Ethan replied. You spoke. You didn't run. And that's stronger than anything they can throw at you. Anna looked down at Valor, still pressed against her chair, his eyes never leaving her. She stroked his head slowly, each pass of her hand steadying her breath. We'll do this. For them. Ethan nodded once, the soldier's nod of an ally stepping into battle. For them. The fire cracked in the stove, sparks dancing against the glass. Outside, the mountain lay silent beneath its shroud of snow. Inside, Anna Rivera had chosen to stop running, and at the center of that choice stood a dog, silent, immovable. the anchor that kept her steady in a storm designed to erase her voice. The courthouse in Cheyenne rose like a slab of stone against the winter sky, its columns frosted with ice, its steps slick with slush. Inside, heat pressed against tension until the very walls seemed to strain. Ana Rivera sat at the witness stand. Her hands gripped the polished rail, knuckles white. She had practiced this moment dozens of nights at the cabin, Ethan guiding, Valor steady at her feet. But practice was nothing compared to the weight of eyes on her now. The jury, the judge, strangers in the benches. And at the defense table, Richard Alton, glasses glinting beneath the fluorescence, his smirk faint but deliberate. Ethan sat just behind the rail, close enough for Anna to see if she faltered. Valor wasn't allowed in court, but Ethan had fought to keep him just outside the door, a sentinel in the hallway. Even unseen, Anna felt him there, the memory of his muzzle pressed into her lap, steady as breath. The prosecutor, Marianne Kessler, stood firm. Ms. Rivera, for the record, your full name? Ana Marisol Rivera. Her voice trembled, but carried. Thank you. Can you tell the court how you came to know the man at the defense table, Richard Alton? Anna's eyes flicked toward him. Cold, unblinking. She swallowed hard. I first saw him 3 years ago, at a shelter in Denver. He said he was Child Protective Services, papers, badge, the whole thing. We believed him. A murmur rippled through the benches. And was he? No. Anna's voice cracked. He worked with them, the people running shelters like traps. They weren't protecting us. They were selling us, moving us like cargo. He told us if we obeyed, we'd be safe. But no one was safe. Gasps stirred the jury box. One woman pressed a hand to her mouth. Kessler's tone sharpened. Miss Rivera, what happened while you were under his control? The room tilted for a moment in Anna's vision. Memories pressed like a tide. She looked at Ethan. His eyes held hers, steady. She remembered Valor's weight anchoring her. Drawing from both, she inhaled and spoke. They kept us in places that looked abandoned. Warehouses, ranger stations, even shelters still open. Windows covered, doors locked. They gave us fake IDs, said if we caused trouble we'd be transferred. Women disappeared overnight. They said it was safer housing, but they never came back. The courtroom hushed. Even the judge leaned forward. Alton wasn't just a guard, Anna continued, her voice trembling but rising. He was the one who convinced us to trust him. Papers, smiles, promises. He was the hand that opened the door to the prison. I saw him take women. I saw him take children. Her chest heaved. And when I escaped... How did you escape? Kessler's voice softened. It was snowing. I was sick. They'd grown careless. The lock wasn't fastened right. I grabbed Mateo and ran. Into the storm. I thought we'd freeze to death, but I would rather die in the snow than spend one more night in that place. Her voice steadied now, carried by defiance. That's when Ethan Cole and Valor found us. If they hadn't, we wouldn't be here. Silence hung heavy. Jurors stared, pale, shaken. Ethan sat rigid, pride and ache colliding in his chest. He had watched her falter in practice. Now she stood unbroken under Alton's gaze. At the defense table, Alton leaned back, smirk fading. His attorney scribbled furiously, but Anna never looked at him again. Judge Weaver cleared his throat. The record will reflect the witness's statement. Recess, 15 minutes. The gavel cracked. Anna's knees buckled as she rose. For a moment, it seemed she'd collapse, until she glimpsed the doorway. Vala waited there, ears pricked, eyes locked on her. She managed a small, trembling smile. When court reconvened, the hum of voices returned. At the defense table, Alton's smirk had slithered back, curling at the edges. His lawyer, a broad man with slick hair, rose with theatrical slowness. "Ms. Rivera," he began, voice smooth, "you've spun quite a tale. Storms, conspiracies, hidden prisons, cinematic. Yet you vanished for 3 years. No calls, no police, no family contact. Doesn't that strike you as unusual?" Anna's grip on the rail tightened. "Isn't it true," he pressed, circling like a predator, "that you fabricated this to excuse your absence? That you abandoned your child, and now you shift blame to my client, a man whose only crime was trying to help?" Alton adjusted his glasses, smirk widening. Anna shook her head, voice thin. "That's not true. I never abandoned Mateo. The lawyer cut in. "Where's the evidence? We have only the word of someone who hid for years, who resurfaces with a story when it suits her. My client is a public servant." "Yet you paint him as—" "Objection!" Kessler's voice cracked like a whip. "Sustained!" Judge Weaver snapped. The lawyer raised his hands innocently, then leaned closer, his voice silken and cruel. "Tell me, Ms. Rivera, isn't it possible your memories are mistaken? Stress, guilt, imagination. Perhaps you aren't a victim, but a storyteller, seeking sympathy." Anna's chest rose and fell rapidly. "I know what I saw. I know what he did. Or perhaps," the lawyer interrupted with a faint smile, "this is fabrication, nothing more." The words dropped like stones. Murmurs rippled. For a moment, the tide of the room seemed to shift. Then a small voice cut through. "Mama, do not lie." Every head turned. Mateo stood in the gallery, barely tall enough to peer over the rail, teddy bear clutched tight, his wide, dark eyes locked on Alton. His voice wavered, but carried, pure and unshaken. "He is a scary man." The silence that followed was absolute. Anna gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Ethan rose instantly, steadying the boy's shoulder, but Mateo didn't falter. He stared at Alton as though he could see through him. Jurors froze. Expressions shifted. Shock, pity, anger. One woman pressed her hand to her chest, eyes glistening. Alton's smirk cracked. His jaw clenched, glasses slipping. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering sharp, frantic words. Too late. The child's voice had carried. Judge Weaver's gavel rapped once. Order. His eyes lingered on Mateo, then flicked to Alton. The record will reflect the child's spontaneous statement. Anna broke into sobs, reaching for her son, though distance kept them apart. Ethan guided Mateo gently back, but the boy's eyes stayed fixed on Alton with a fierceness beyond his years. The room was no longer skeptical. It was convinced. The prosecutor rose. "The state calls Detective Halverson." A tall man in a plain suit swore his oath and sat. His voice was blunt, unwavering. In the early hours of February 10th, a search warrant was executed on a ranger station in Medicine Bow. Inside we found tarped windows, falsified IDs, transport logs, and 12 women and 4 children, malnourished, restrained, but alive. Their testimony aligns with Ms. Rivera's account. Gasps rippled. Jurors leaned forward, pens forgotten. Halverson held up a folder. We recovered photographs, many matching missing persons, several marked with notes, transfer, priority. One file included a photograph of the defendant at that very site. "Detective," Kessler said. "Do you see that man in this courtroom?" "Yes." Halverson pointed directly at Alton. "He's right there." All eyes turned. Alton sat rigid, mask slipping. The defense lawyer shot up. "Objection. Prejudicial. Overruled." Judge Weaver cut sharply. "The testimony stands." The jurors exchanged grim looks. The tide had surged. Weaver's voice grew heavy. "Given the evidence, the testimony of Miss Rivera, the corroboration of her child, and the recovery of living victims, the court finds probable cause to proceed with charges of trafficking, fraud, and unlawful imprisonment. Bail is denied." The gavel cracked. Deputies closed in. Handcuffs snapped loud in the silence. Alton's face darkened. He turned, eyes burning into Anna. His voice slipped out, low and venomous. "This isn't over." The deputies dragged him back. The chain spoke louder than he ever could. Anna swayed. Ethan moved fast, catching her before her knees gave way. "It's over," he murmured, steady as stone. She clung to him, sobbing. "I thought no one would believe me." "You spoke," Ethan said, his voice fierce but quiet. "And now it ends." The jurors filed out silently, some dabbing their eyes. The gallery emptied in a hushed tide of disbelief. Ethan guided Anna out, her frame trembling against him. Outside the chamber, Vala whined softly, sensing the shift. When Anna stepped into the hall, the shepherd pressed against her leg, grounding her. Matteo hurried into her arms, teddy bear still clutched tight. Anna looked at them, her son, the dog, the man who had carried her story into the light. And for the first time, she breathed like someone free. The battle wasn't finished. Trials, appeals, shadows still waited. But today, the system had turned to her side. As Alton was led away in chains, Anna leaned into Ethan's arms and whispered the word she hadn't dared believe in for years. Safe. Spring in Wyoming arrived quietly, as if the land itself were afraid to trust the season. Snow still clung to the ridges, melting into rivulets that carved the slopes. The air carried both the bite of winter and the promise of thaw. For the first time in years, Anna Rivera felt herself thawing too. The trial hadn't erased the scars. At night, shadows still woke her. Sudden noises, a knock, an engine too close, still froze her chest. But mornings were different now. Mornings carried routine, possibility. Ethan parked outside Everpine's small brick clinic, its sign chipped from years of storms. Inside lived something Anna had almost forgotten, kindness without agenda. She sat stiff in the passenger seat, staring at the entrance as though it were a cliff edge. "You don't have to do this today," Ethan said gently. Anna shook her head. "If I wait, I'll never do it. I need to start now." She opened the door. Matteo scrambled out after her, teddy bear under one arm, the other hand gripping Valor's collar. The shepherd moved with calm authority, escort written into his bones. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and coffee. A receptionist looked up and smiled, warm and genuine. "You must be Anna. We've been expecting you." Ethan spoke with Dr. Marsh. Anna's breath caught, but she nodded. The woman led them down a hall where sunlight spilled across beige walls brightened by fresh paint. "Doctor?" Marsh, wiry, steel-haired, rose from behind a desk stacked with folders. "Anna," she said, eyes kind but sharp. "You don't have to prove anything here. Just being here is enough." Anna's throat tightened. She managed a whisper. "Thank you." Tasks were simple. Intake forms, restocking supplies. But for Anna, each felt like a step across a bridge she'd once thought burned. Outside, Ethan and Matteo waited in a garden where snow retreated into mud. Vala bounded ahead, Matteo's laughter chasing him high and free. Ethan leaned against the wall, listening. That laugh, It had been months since it rang so unburdened. Through the window, Anna froze at the sight. Her son, flushed and laughing, Vala circling protectively, her hand pressed to the glass. For the first time in years, she allowed herself the dangerous luxury of hope. When her shift ended, Matteo barreled into her arms, still breathless with joy. Vala nudged her hand, steady as ever. They walked to the truck together, the boy between them, the dog trotting like a shadow. "How was it?" Ethan asked as the engine turned. Anna exhaled slowly. "Good. Scary. But good." She looked out at the receding clinic. "It felt like the first day of the rest of my life." "That's because it was," Ethan said with a rare smile. And for the first time, she believed him. The letter had been harder. Ethan wrote and rewrote before deciding on a call. No script prepared him for the sound of Isabel Rivera's voice, lined with grief, disbelief. Gently, carefully, he told her. Anna was alive, safe, ready, if Isabel was willing, to see her again. For a long moment, silence. Then weeping, deep and cracked open after years of being locked shut. By the end of the call, it was settled. Isabel would come to Everpine. The day of her arrival, the cabin hummed with invisible weight. Anna moved like someone bracing for impact, folding blankets that were already neat, adjusting a kettle that didn't need adjusting. "What if she doesn't want me?" she whispered. "I disappeared for 3 years. I didn't call. What if all she remembers is that I left?" Ethan shook his head. "What she'll remember is that you came back." By afternoon, the growl of an engine climbed the ridge. Anna froze at the window. Ethan stepped onto the porch. "Come. You should be the first she sees." The sedan pulled up. Isabel Rivera stepped out, hair streaked with silver now, shoulders stooped by years, but eyes fierce and searching. Anna stood in the doorway, hands pressed to the frame. For a heartbeat, they only stared across the years. Then Isabel whispered, "Anita?" That broke her. Anna stumbled forward. "Mama?" They collided in an embrace that collapsed time. Anna sobbed into her mother's shoulder, Isabel weeping openly, clutching her daughter as if to stitch 3 lost years back together. "I thought you were dead," Isabel cried. "Every night I prayed. And now, look at you. You're here. You're alive." "I wanted to call. I was so afraid," Anna gasped. "I thought I was protecting you. I'm sorry." Isabel gripped her face. "No more sorry. You're here. That's all that matters." Ethan stood aside, Matteo at his side clutching his bear. Isabel's gaze fell to him, tears spilling fresh. Anna's voice shook. "Mama, this is your grandson." Matteo hesitated, pressing against Ethan's leg, until Valor nudged him forward with gentle insistence. Isabel knelt, arms open. "My child, come." With a glance at Anna, Matteo stepped into her embrace. Isabel held him tightly, murmuring words he didn't understand but felt in his bones. For the first time in years, 3 generations stood together. The circle fear had broken was mending. That night, Isabel cooked rice and beans, filling the cabin with smells of home. Anna sat at the table, listening to her mother hum. Matteo played on the rug, Valor nudging his blocks. Ethan leaned back, watching. For once, peace felt possible. Spring deepened. The town of Everpine, scarred but resilient, rallied in ways Ethan hadn't seen before. Alton's arrest and the raid on the compound had shaken them, but instead of retreating, they chose to build. They called it the Winter Haven Initiative. Real shelters, safe shelters for women and children. At the ribbon cutting, banners painted by school children fluttered, snowflakes, pine trees, the words hope and safe haven. A crowd gathered despite the chill. Anna stood with Ethan and Matteo, Isabel at her side. But the star was Valor. The shepherd sat tall at the front of the stage, a red scarf tied around his neck. The crowd erupted in applause when he was led forward. Children gasped, clapped, tugged at their parents. Matteo beamed, squeezing Anna's hand. "See? He's ours." Ethan knelt, adjusting the scarf. "Guess you're the star today, partner." Valor's tail thumped once, dignified. When the mayor called his name, our symbol of loyalty and survival, Valor, the cheers rose again. One by one, children came forward. Tiny hands stroked his fur, pressed against his side, wrapped around his neck. Valor accepted each touch, patient, calm. Anna watched, throat tight. This was the same dog who had steadied her when she couldn't speak, who had kept her son alive in the snow. Now he was anchoring an entire town. A girl no older than 7 hugged him and whispered something only he heard. Valor rested his head gently on her shoulder. She smiled through tears as she pulled away. Her mother, off stage, wiped her eyes. When Anna stepped forward to speak, her voice trembled but grew stronger. "I know what it means to feel unsafe. I know what it means to be afraid of the very places meant to protect you." But today, Everpine is showing something different. A true haven. A promise. She glanced at Valor. "This dog saved me when I couldn't save myself. He saved my son. And today he reminds us what loyalty means. Winter Haven isn't just a program. It's a promise. And promises can hold." Applause thundered. Matteo wriggled free, ran to Valor, and wrapped his arms around his neck. Into the microphone, his small voice carried, "Doggy safe." Laughter and tears rippled through the crowd. From that day, Valor became Winter Haven's emblem. Posters bore his image, scarf bright against his fur, beneath the words, "Safe, loyal, home." Children arriving at shelters were handed plush toys shaped like him, small guardians for the night. Ethan watched the change unfold. Mothers stepping off buses, children too quiet for their age. Valor met them first. His presence dissolved fear faster than words. Slowly, laughter returned, like snowmelt feeding rivers. One evening, Ethan sat on the cabin porch, watching Anna and Isabel plant seeds in thawing soil. Matteo raced circles in the yard, Valor loping patiently after, letting himself be tagged, hugged, claimed. The red scarf still bright around his neck. Ethan leaned back, letting the sight wash over him. This was survival transformed, not just enduring, but rebuilding into something stronger. Valor had carried them through the storm. Now he carried a town. And in the quiet light, with laughter spilling across the yard, Ethan understood. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear fur. Sometimes they save the world simply by staying steadfast, loyal, and unbreakable. The first warmth of spring had begun to reach the mountains. Snowmelt trickled down the slopes in silver ribbons. The pines shook off their winter coats, and the days stretched longer, carrying the hint of green. The cabin, once a place of mourning and silence, now stood as something different. A home, learning how to breathe again. That afternoon, Ethan balanced on a ladder, untangling a string of lights he hadn't touched in years. The wire coiled stubbornly, twisting into knots as though resisting the moment. Below him, Anna held the strand, her face tilted toward the roofline. A faint smile curved her lips. "You kept these?" she asked. Ethan blinked against the brightness. "Yeah. Claire loved them. Every spring she said lights shouldn't just belong to Christmas. Said people need reminders of joy in the in-between months." His voice softened. "After she passed, I didn't see the point anymore." Anna's gaze lingered on him, warm, but touched with sorrow. "And now?" He looked down at her, at the woman who had walked through fire and chosen to live. "Now," he said, carefully hooking the first bulb along the eave, "I think she'd want me to put them up again, not just for her, for what survived." The words settled between them, heavy but gentle. Anna reached into the box, handing him another coil. "Then let's do it, for her and for us." They worked together in quiet rhythm. Ethan moved along the ladder, fastening bulbs, while Anna untangled the line below. Each motion felt like stitching something torn, delicate, deliberate, necessary. In the yard, Matteo played with Valor, his laughter carrying on the breeze. The boy darted between snow and mud, with his teddy tucked under his arm, while the shepherd followed patiently, retrieving sticks, steady as ever. Once, such laughter had seemed impossible. Now it rang full. As Ethan shifted the ladder, Anna steadied it, her hand gripping the side. "It feels strange," she admitted. "Doing something so normal, like I don't deserve it after everything." He glanced down. "Anna, listen to me. You deserve this, more than anyone. Survival isn't just breathing. It's moments like this, stringing lights, hearing your boy laugh. That's what they tried to take. Don't let them succeed." Her throat tightened. "How do you carry Claire and still find space for all this?" Ethan clipped another bulb into place. "I won't forget her. I never will. But grief taught me something. Love doesn't run out. It changes shape. It makes room." His gaze locked with hers. "This isn't replacing what's gone. It's honoring it by choosing life again." Tears blurred her eyes, but she nodded. "Then tonight, when those lights glow, they'll glow for Claire. And for every night I thought would never end. They'll glow because we're still here." By the time the last bulb was clipped, the sun had dipped low, casting the cabin in gold. Ethan plugged in the cord. At first, nothing. Then, one by one, the bulbs flickered to life, spilling warm amber across the eaves. Anna gasped, her hand rising to her chest. "It's beautiful." Ethan didn't answer right away. He watched her instead, the glow softening the shadows fear had carved in her face. For the first time, she looked not just like a survivor, but someone beginning to believe in tomorrow. Matteo bounded up the steps, Valor at his heels. "Mama, look! Lights!" His eyes widened in wonder. "They make the house look happy." Anna knelt, pulling him close. "Yes, mi amor, happy." She kissed his hair, hiding her tears in his curls. Valor padded forward, his red scarf catching the glow. His eyes reflected the warmth, steady as always, claiming the moment for memory. For months, this cabin had been a place of ghosts. Tonight, it was alive again. The lights shimmered in the dusk, fragile yet defiant, glowing not just for the dead, but for the living, who refused to be broken. Ethan whispered a promise only he could hear. "We will not let the dark win." Behind the cabin the next morning, Isabel Rivera stood with her grandson at the edge of thawed ground. The soil was still dark with moisture, but soft enough to dig. She had rolled up her sleeves, her hands dirty, though no real seeds lay in the basket beside her. This planting wasn't about crops. It was about something else entirely. "Here, mi cielo," she said, handing Matteo a small wooden spoon. "We dig here. Just a little hole." Matteo knelt in the mud, his teddy bear abandoned on the porch. He scraped the soil, giggling when it clumped beneath his nails. "Like planting flowers?" "See," Isabel replied, her smile touched with tears. "Like flowers. But these seeds are special. They are for hope." "Hope grows?" the boy asked, tilting his head. "Always," Isabel said, "if you give it a place." A few feet away, Vala lay across the damp ground, ears swiveling, eyes locked on the boy. Each time Matteo shifted, the shepherd's tail thumped softly against the mud, as if to say, "I'm here. You are safe." From the porch, Anna watched her mother and her son, her heart caught between ache and wonder. Isabel had once belonged to a life Anna thought she had lost forever. Now she was here, teaching Matteo the meaning of beginnings. Ethan stepped beside Anna, handing her a mug of coffee. They stood shoulder to shoulder, steam curling into the air. "He's never had this before," Anna murmured. "Planting, playing in the dirt like a normal child." Ethan's voice was low. "He's not just planting dirt. He's planting roots. Here. With you." Anna's throat tightened. She watched as Isabel guided Matteo's small hands, showing him how to pat the soil after placing the pretend seeds. He whispered something to the ground, then looked up. "Now what happens?" "Now we wait," Isabel said, brushing his cheek. "The earth remembers. The sun listens. And one day, something new will grow." Matteo pressed his teddy's paw into the soil. "He helps too." Isabel laughed, the sound rich and free. Ethan crouched near the boy. "What did you plant, Matteo?" "A tree. So big, it touches the clouds." Ethan smiled. "That's a good choice. Strong. Lasts a long time." Matteo nodded solemnly. "And safe. Doggies can sit under it." He pointed at Valor, who wagged his tail as if agreeing. The symbolism pressed heavy on Anna's chest. For years, she had been adrift, rootless. And here, in her mother's hands and her son's laughter, roots were being imagined. Pretend seeds planted into real earth, carrying the promise of permanence. Isabel rose, wiping her hands. She looked at Anna, her voice soft but clear. "Every pain we bury, every fear we let go, it can become soil. From that soil, we plant new life. This is how families heal." Tears spilled freely now. Anna knelt beside her son, pressing her hand into the damp earth. "Then let this be our beginning," she whispered. Matteo grinned. "Our tree." Valor shifted closer, resting his chin on the ground between them, as if he understood this was not just play, but a vow. Ethan saw it plainly, generations bending, breaking, and now mending. Isabel, scarred by silence. Anna, scarred by survival. Matteo, still soft clay, being shaped by love. And Valor, the guardian binding them all. The wind stirred through the pines, carrying the scent of thawed earth. Sunlight broke through clouds, casting warmth over the small patch of soil where pretend seeds lay buried. It wasn't a garden yet. It wasn't even a real seed. But it was a promise. And sometimes, Ethan thought, promises grew deepest of all. Evening folded over the mountains, laying quiet across the pines. The sky smudged violet, and the cabin glowed from within. A fire crackled in the stove, its warmth pushing back the lingering chill of spring. Inside, Isabel hummed softly in the kitchen. Matteo had fallen asleep on the rug, curled against Valor's side, teddy bear clutched tight. The shepherd didn't stir, gaze fixed on the flames as though guarding the boy, even in dreams. Anna sat in the armchair nearest the stove, wrapped in a wool blanket. Ethan sat opposite, leaning back in quiet ease. For the first time in a long time, their silence wasn't haunted. It was comfortable, earned. Anna stared into the fire, her fingers playing with the fringe of the blanket. Her voice was soft but steady. I used to think safety meant being invisible. For 3 years, I believed the only way Matteo and I could survive was if no one knew where we were. If we hid deep enough, stayed quiet enough, maybe the world would forget us. I thought that was safe. She drew a shaky breath. But it wasn't. It was another prison. And now I know safety isn't hiding. It's being seen. Having someone look at you and say, I know who you are, and you still matter. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and certain. You've always been visible to me. Anna's eyes widened, caught off guard. From the night Valor led me to you in that storm, I saw you. Not just a survivor. I saw someone who had been through hell and was still standing. You've never been invisible, Anna. Not to me. Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision, but she let them fall, unashamed. No one's ever said that to me before, she whispered. You deserved to hear it a long time ago, Ethan replied. His tone carried no pity, only recognition. Anna let out a shaky laugh. You make it sound so simple. It is. The hard part isn't being seen. The hard part is believing you're worth seeing. The words settled deep inside her, like seeds planted earlier that day. She let them rest there, fragile, but alive. The fire painted her face with warmth. She glanced at Matteo and Valor on the rug, her chest swelling with something she hadn't dared to name in years. Peace. Do you think it lasts? She asked. This calm, this feeling like maybe we're safe now? Ethan's lips curved faintly. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know this. Tonight, it's real. And that's enough. She looked back at him, her heart pounding with terrifying hope. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt present, seen, alive. The fire cracked louder, sparks scattering against the stove glass. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Inside, scars lingered, but they were no longer chains, only reminders of battles survived. Anna drew the blanket tighter, her voice soft but resolute. Then maybe this is what safety feels like. Not being invisible, but being here, being seen. Ethan's eyes held hers. Exactly. And in that quiet room, with flames warming the dark, with a child's laughter echoing faintly in memory, and a shepherd guarding their fragile peace, the truth settled in both of them. Survival was no longer the end of the story. It was the beginning of something new. The town square of Everpine had never looked so alive. Sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, catching on banners painted with pine trees and snowflakes. Folding chairs filled the square. Townsfolk bundled against the lingering chill, faces turned expectantly toward the stage draped in evergreen garlands. Ethan shifted at the edge, uneasy in the spotlight. He had never liked ceremonies. But today wasn't about him. It was about them, about Anna, Matteo, Isabel, and Valor. About resilience made visible. The mayor's voice rang out. Neighbors, friends, we gather not just to welcome spring, but to honor courage. Ethan Cole, whose service never wavered. Anna Rivera, who turned survival into strength. And Valor, a shepherd whose loyalty reminds us that guardians come in many forms. Applause rippled. Anna flushed, lowering her head. Ethan gave a curt nod. Valor remained still, chest broad, eyes calm. And sometimes, the mayor continued, lifting a velvet box, courage comes in the smallest of packages. Matteo Rivera, will you join me? The boy froze. Anna squeezed his shoulder. Ethan nodded. Valor nudged his hand. Shakily, Matteo stepped forward. The mayor knelt, opening the box. This medal is for bravery, for truth, and for reminding us that even the youngest voices can carry the strongest truths. He draped the silver medallion around the child's neck. The crowd roared with cheers, remembering the words he had spoken in court. Mama, do not lie. He is a scary man. Matteo looked down at the shining medal. Then, slowly, he turned. Kneeling before Valor, he slipped the ribbon over the shepherd's neck. For you too. The square fell silent, then erupted louder than before. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping tears. Anna wept openly. Isabel sobbed into her handkerchief, and Ethan's throat locked. He had seen medals pinned on soldiers, but never shared so purely, so freely. The mayor's voice shook. Everpine will remember this moment. This family has shown us that survival can become strength, and strength can become hope. Anna slipped her hand into Ethan's. He met her gaze, and for once, did not resist the warmth there. Matteo leaned against Valor, the medal gleaming against fur. The boy's smile bright as spring sunlight. It was not just recognition, it was affirmation. Their scars, their silence, their storms had led here, not invisibility, but honor. When the ceremony ended, applause faded into memory. The family walked away from the square, following a trail to the edge of town. Dogwoods stood in bloom, their pale petals scattering with the breeze. Beneath a wide tree, they spread a blanket. This is better, Ethan murmured, as he set down the basket. Better than a stage? Anna asked. Better than 100 people staring? She laughed softly. We've both had enough of crowds. Matteo raced around the tree, arms outstretched. Look, Mama, I'm flying. His laughter carried through the blossoms, strong and full. Valor watched every movement, rising when the boy stumbled, standing guard until he steadied himself. Only then did he return to his post, tail flicking once in approval. Isabel unpacked sandwiches, smiling through her weariness. He's growing so fast. Too fast, Anna whispered. For so long he was silent. I thought fear had stolen his voice forever. But now he doesn't just have a voice. He has joy. Ethan followed her gaze, chest tightening. He had seen too many children robbed of innocence. Watching Mateo laugh was like watching the world correct itself. They ate quietly, blossoms drifting onto the blanket. Mateo tossed handfuls into the air, squealing as they fell like confetti. Valor barked once, a deep, happy sound that made him laugh harder. Without thinking, Anna leaned against Ethan's shoulder. He didn't move away. They sat in silence, watching petals fall. At last, she whispered, "For years I thought peace was impossible, that even if I survived, I'd never feel it again. But this feels like peace." "Because it is," Ethan said simply. "No crowds, no courtrooms, just you, your boy, your mother, and a dog who refuses to let the world touch you." Her eyes glistened. "I could live in this moment forever." "You are," he replied. "Every second you choose to stay, that's forever enough." The applause of the town had been loud, affirming. But here in the grove, recognition came from silence, from blossoms drifting through sunlight, from family. Night fell over the mountains. The cabin glowed like a lantern in the snow, firelight spilling through its windows. Inside, warmth filled every corner. Mateo sprawled on the rug, clutching his teddy bear. Vala stretched beside him, massive head resting on the boy's knees. The shepherd's eyes were half-lidded, but vigilant still. Anna curled in a blanket on the sofa, eyes reflecting the flames. She no longer looked like someone defined by fear, but by what she had reclaimed: life, safety, fragile beauty. Ethan adjusted the fire, then sat beside her, draping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. The fire's glow mingled with the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Protection, trust, home. He looked at Mateo and Valor, then at Anna, and thought of the journey that had carried them here. Storms, trials, courtroom battles, sleepless nights. Now the room itself was proof they had endured, that they were whole again. Anna's fingers found his. "We made it here. All of us." Ethan kissed her temple softly. "We did, and we'll stay here, together." Valor lifted his head once, glancing at each of them in turn, his tail thumping gently against the floor. His red scarf glimmered faintly in the firelight. He had been more than a dog. He had been their bridge, their guardian, their constant. Anna breathed deeply, eyes drifting across the cabin. The pictures on the walls, the worn rugs, the simple furniture, all of it infused with meaning now, each piece part of the life they were building. "I used to think survival was enough," she whispered. "But this is more. This is life." Ethan's hand tightened on hers. Life is the small moments. Laughter, warmth, knowing you're seen and safe. You fought for that, Anna, and now you have it. Mateo murmured in his sleep, Valor sighing beside him. Sparks floated up the chimney like falling stars. The final glow of the night was not in applause or medals. It was here, in laughter returned, in a mother's touch rediscovered, in a family stitched whole again. Ethan whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Miracles arrive quietly, through loyalty, compassion, and courage. And sometimes they arrive just in time to teach you what really matters. Anna pressed her cheek to his chest. Mateo dreamed in safety. Valor kept watch, a sentinel finally at ease. And as the fire burned low, the truth settled over them all. They were home. If there's one thing this story reminds us, it's how deeply dogs touch our hearts. German shepherds, with their unwavering loyalty and quiet strength, aren't just companions. They become anchors in the storms of our lives. The way Valor stayed by Anna and Mateo through fear, darkness, and uncertainty shows us the incredible emotional bond we can share with our animals. Love for a dog isn't measured in grand gestures. It's in the quiet moments, the trust in their eyes, the comfort of their presence when words fail. If you feel that pull in your own life, that desire to connect more meaningfully with your dog, to understand them not just as pets, but as true companions, there are gentle resources that can help you nurture that bond. I've found that even small steps, taken with patience and care, can open new doors to trust and joy between humans and dogs. Take a moment to explore something that feels right for you and your four-legged friend. It's not about doing more. It's about noticing and appreciating the love already there and letting it grow. Your dog is listening, and I promise, the feeling is mutual.